Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Art of Creation Show. I'm your host, Frank Fradella, coming to you from Turin, Italy, and joined, as I am every single week, by my astounding, exceptional co-host, Rebecca Jane Boswell. Rebecca, how are things going there?
Yes. Things are going great here, Greenville, South Carolina, but not for long. And yeah, I'm just marveling at your new set there, Frank. Are you gonna share some of your culinary magic, Italian style, with us today? Is that the special treat we have today on the show?
Not today. What we do have is the ever so lovely Lauren Polly on the show today, who comes equipped with her own teal wicker basket background, which
Yes.
is not. There's just no. I have blue tile. Look at what she's bringing to the table.
There's no comparison to this. Sorry.
Before the show, we were talking to Lauren, and you see, she actually has that little drink me potion from Alice in Wonderland. So, if you too want to be able to broadcast one day from inside a basket, you just should talk to her, because maybe you could get some drink me potion.
This is, I always liken. Yeah.
So wait a minute.
I always liken the access tools to kind of like going to Hogwarts. So I have no doubt that this magic is possible. Yeah.
So, you're not going to be cooking for us, Frank, today, but not only do we get to feast our eyes on the lovely Lauren Polly and play around with her being in a basket, actually, we are going to be doing something very different. In fact, we're going to be talking today about going big. So getting out of the baskets, getting out of the box, going beyond the temptation to stay small, to stay in our comfort zone, to live according to what everybody else in our life has told us is appropriate. And so Lauren, I'm wondering, what even got you interested in this topic, right? Like, not only are you willing to talk about going big and willing to be the energy of going big, like, you got here from somewhere, I'm guessing. And I'm wondering, can you share some of that with us so that we can, our viewers can have a sense of like what you are and who you are in this 10 seconds and where you're looking to go?
Yeah, I would say going big to me wasn't ever a target that I had. It's kind of funny. Most of the really fun, joyful things I've created in my life, I've almost fallen ass backwards into. I kind of did that with my career as a medical speech therapist. I just chose what was fun and what really clicked with my brain. And as soon as I got into that program, I was like, oh, this thing. Same thing with now my book that's just a bestseller. And I just won a literary award for it too. Yay! Yeah, so it's been really fun being able to like create joyfully, and where I just get those pops of self-fulfillment, and really where that does lead to just expansion in every area, which is so different than what most people think. They think if they want to go big, they have to have a very specific target or goal in mind, and then they chase that like a dog with a bone, and unfortunately end up shooting yourself in the foot that way.
Yeah, or even or reverse engineering it, right? Like having the sense of like, I have to get here, so now I'm going to work backwards to see exactly everything I have to do to get there.
Yeah,
I love, and that's typically the way people chase success. But I love that you use the word fulfillment, or what you found fulfilling, because you ended up with a very successful existence because you chose what was fulfilling for you. Whereas most people who chase success don't end up with a very fulfilling life.
Well, and those guys too they're kind of living in this, like the basket I have behind me at this very moment. They're living very contained by their promise of success. And unfortunately, that becomes an unfulfilled promise a lot of times. So there's a way that we look at what success could be, or being big could be, or having a bigger reach, or a huge sphere of influence. And unfortunately, there's so many conclusions and definitions in that. There's also a lot of falsehoods that actually don't speak to who you actually are and what you can contribute to the world. And for me, that's like one of the biggest practices I've been playing with the last 2-3 years, is getting out of my own way, getting out of my own personal box or basket or whatever that crazy thing is, where it's like, this is who I am, this is what I can do and be. When actually what I've created, I never would have thought had you told me, 10 years ago, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Awesome. So for my own edification, there's been something I've been playing around with, trying to identify these conclusions and points of view and so on, especially in relation to success and fulfillment. It seems to me, and let me know if you agree with this, that success is very often defined by other people's projections and expectations, whereas fulfillment is almost entirely self-directed or self-defined. So, okay,
and
cool. Glad to have that validation. I'm done for the day. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. Take care.
Well, Frank, what's really interesting too is success sort of has this element of time built in as well, right? It has sort of this trajectory of like, we will someday get to this thing where we've now arrived and then we have success. Whereas fulfillment is something that has the possibility of actually being right now. Mm-hmm. And so regardless of where you are, or where you've gotten, or what you've achieved, it's something that is either here with you, or it's something out there that, that you're striving towards. But like true fulfillment is actually in the moment, whereas oftentimes success, we project it as something, that we're en route to.
Well, and unfortunately with that, you're constantly chasing it. You can never actually have it, let alone be it. And I think that's the big thing with the going big conversation, is there is an energy to being big. And there's also a way that you can perceive the energy of what you would like your life to be, what you would like to be in the world, and pull that into the now. And that's not a fake it till you make it kind of thing. That's actually the energy that is possible for you. And being that now with what you're creating allows that creation to continue to expand. People find you in totally miraculous ways with that. There's a different way of being and presenting not only you, but what you've created to the world. And that, again, it lets you have it now. It also lets you have the kind of that happiness quotient. I was looking at what I wanted to create years and years ago, and I was having a session with Shannon O'Hara at the time, who's the founder of Talk to the Entities. And we were talking about the success conversation. She says, Lauren, you got to get, you're happy, and happy people just succeed. It's what they do. So you don't need to get all lost in your head. You're happy. You be happy now. You just keep doing what makes you happy. And truly, it sounds so simple and also super hard at the same time. But if you can harness that skill, it creates massively.
Yeah. Well, and how many people have decided that they need to be successful so that they can be happy, as opposed to being what brings you joy and what creates joy, and letting the success or whatever the trappings are be drawn into that sense of joy, that happiness that you're being. Yeah. And that's kind of backwards than what we're taught in this reality. Now, we had Julia Sotis on the show a couple months back, and she also talked about the energy pulls. And I was wondering if you would share with our viewers how you like to how you like to play with the pulls, and what tips and insight would you give them about how to do it, even if they've never played with energy before?
So the energy pulls are amazing because, like I said, you can perceive that space of future and that future possibility, what you could actually be, and pull it into the now. So it's like pulling what you desire towards you. It's fascinating too, because I find so many people play with this pulling of energy, but they do it with such a heady space or a very conclusionary way of thinking about it. I want this thing. And they try to suck that one thing like sucking through a straw. And it was funny because I was doing that for a while and there was all this contraction around me. For me, before I pull energy, there is this space of relaxation and opening. So like right now, if y'all could just feel your feet on the floor, your bottom in your seat, so you stay present with your body. And start to expand the space around you. And I just want you to actually perceive the space around you. Where does it open with ease? In the front, in the back, in the sides, up top, down below. And wherever it doesn't open quite as dynamically, could you actually push whatever barrier or boundary that is, that basket, down, 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 down. And actually push it down so much that you start to open to the space beyond it. And I was doing this the other day. I was looking at pulling energy and I could only perceive it coming from up top. For me, I was like, if I can stop for a second and actually allow myself to expand out down below, the entire earth started to open up. So allow the earth to be totally open to you. The universe, the celestials, all open up above. Front to back, side to side, everybody around you to open as well. More and more and more and more space. And before we pull, just notice where your mind is if you don't have a mind anymore. When you're allowing yourself to open into this much space, your mind will get quiet, your body will get more relaxed. Guess what? Your conclusions start to go too. More space with that. And now actually reaching out, top to bottom, side to side, front to back, spherically, diagonally, everywhere into the universe for what it is you would like to create big with. And just get the energy of that. Whether that's lots of money, a big sphere of influence, a movement for social change, a possibility that you know that no one else knows. And pull in energy from everywhere now. And again, notice, does it come from in front more easily than from the back? If so, pull more dynamically from the back. And if you are noticing yourself sucking through a straw or inhaling, there's only so much energy you can receive that way. Can you actually breathe into the space between the molecules of your body and being? And pull into that. So there's a different way of pulling energy. If you have been playing with that and it has been condensed feeling or like there's a wall that you're hitting or not super effective or relaxing to your body, you may have a little bit of that weird barrier thing. If you actually take a second to get relaxed and to open the space around you, then you reach into that space and pull. So I just do it a little bit differently. I tried forever to do it kind of the more basic way, which is just pull energy. And yes, I can do that, but there was this little, I know there's more there. I'm bigger than that. And it wasn't until I went, oh, wait a second. I'm pulling from celestial. Up above is super dynamic for me, but like, wow, I have all of the elements of the earth to play with too I could pull from.
Yeah.
Open that up.
Yeah.
And feed yourself that way. So this is a really cool way to play with bigger creations, because imagine all that space and all that energy now contributing and co-creating with you. Yeah.
Okay, that was brilliant. Okay, so we've had a couple of guests on the show who have talked about energy poles and have explained or done their best to explain how to be with that and how to actualize that, how to process whatever, right? And I am the redheaded stepchild of energy poles. Like, this is not my, but that was good. Like, I felt I was aware of more. Like, yeah. I was totally present in that moment. I was more relaxed. Yeah. My body went into more ease, and I actually perceived that energy flowing, which is not typical for me. That was a great facilitation. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and Lauren, I think it's brilliant too, this piece of inviting people to really expand first as well. Because I think a lot of times what happens with energy pulls is we make ourselves very solid to be able to pull the energy into our being. And we have this sense of like, oh, this is me. I'm pulling everything into me. and forgetting the space that we truly be. And so the invitation to really expand first and then pull from everywhere and through that. And I got to play one of our previous guests, former guests on the show, Stephanie Richardson. I got to have a really fun play date with her yesterday. And one of the things we were looking at is, when we expand, we're expanding out infinitely in all directions out. And what we were looking at is she was talking about how sometimes, there's something else that she's aware of. And what she got to was also like, how small can we go? And what we were looking at is when you actually pull into the smallest point, infinite as well. There is no one point. So this whole expansion is like, if you're going infinitely in and infinitely out, and then you're pulling from that place, it just is so much more dynamic because you're actually including, like you said, everything, being able to include the earth, but also like not making this solid, because this is just more of this outer space of this infinite going in, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, it's also interesting too, because everyone does this super different. And for the longest time, I felt like the redheaded stepchild too. I'm like, I don't get it. I don't know how to do it. And people kept explaining it to me in different ways. And I was like, yeah, but when I do that, my body feels very tight. It feels very contracted, and it feels like there's not enough space and room. I'm just different with it. There's a need for me first, interesting, but to really be able to relax and expand. And it's not that I can't pull before I do that. It's that it's not as dynamic. It's also not my way, or one of the ways that really
the sense that I had doing this with you, the awareness that I got was kind of that feeling that I have when I've been underwater and I've been holding my breath for a long time, like your lungs filled with carbon dioxide, and you need to expel that before you can draw in fresh air. And that was like, when you asked me to expand, that was me exhaling. It felt right, such a nice release. Like now there was space. Now there was this space where I could pull into. That was just lovely. By the way, we're now 19 minutes into a show, which we warned you up front was going to be big choices, going big, supersizing your choices in your life. We're not playing around here.
Yeah.
Right into the infinite, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I mean, how big are we willing to be, and how much of that space are we willing to occupy? And what I'm really hearing from you, Lauren, is where when you're looking at the energy poles and you're using them, you're really including your body. And I just want to note that as a piece here, where you're offering more ease with your body. You're including your body in this process, and yeah, I think typically when people are talking about the energy poles, that piece is just sort of not a part of the conversation. So
and just as a side note with that too, before I do this in a class or a session, I start a lot of my telecalls this way, just because processing and asking questions from a contracted space like that, you're going to ask something different. It hurts. You're kind of like mind and heady. You're like this. And if you can actually allow yourself to relax and expand, your questions start to be very different. So before I start processing myself even, there's a beat of relaxation, there's expansion. And then from that space, I look at what's going on, which is very different than having to live it down here and then trying to like fix it or change it from that space. It's also very interesting too, because if you're allowing yourself to be present with your body, before I facilitate, it's like, if you notice, I asked you to feel your feet and your bottom on the chair, that just gets you present. So you don't go to space when you expand, you become space, and your body's included also. How many times do we expand and then our expansion takes us out of our body and we leave our sweet body out of the equation? There's massive creative potential in your body.
Ordinarily, I would caution our viewers. Ordinarily, I would caution our viewers not to try this at home, that we are professionals. However, I encourage all of you to try this at home because we are professionals. And I want to just reiterate once again that every episode of the Art of Creation show comes with a money-back guarantee. So enjoy that.
Yeah. So anyone who realizes that they are not an infinite being can actually have all their money back.
Good luck with that one.
And moving on. So Lauren, so working with energy, is this something that you have always done? Was there a point in your life where some sort of light bulb went off? You know, just a little bit before we look at going now into the future and the great beyond, what got you to where you are today, right now, in this 10 seconds?
It's a personal journey. And that was the thing is, like I said, I never had the target of going big or creating any of this stuff, really. For me, it was more of a path of self-healing. My book is called The Other Side of Bipolar, and that chronicles my journey from being diagnosed as bipolar at 14 after a suicide attempt, and going through 10 years plus in Western medical system, like having massive amounts of psychiatric drugs in my body, which of course made my body really sick, contracted my space. And then meeting a holistic psychiatrist at age 20 who actually introduced me to energy. He was the first doctor who talked about not just medication, take a pill and you're stuck this way forever, but like, let's look at energy change. Let's look at relaxation, stress management. Got me involved in like a program that actually worked to my skill set for college, more so than me trying to swim out in no man's land, trying to figure out what it is that I could be or do. And that's really, those are lessons that I've taken throughout my entire life journey now. It's like, what do I have that I can make use of? What can I use to my advantage? And everything that I've been using since then, yoga, meditation, access tools for me are so freaking dynamic. My energetic aptitude to create has just unraveled and unfurled itself for me. It's been a process, absolutely, but a lot of the things that set me down the crazy path early on were actually massive capacities that were energetic based, but because I didn't have a knowledge of how to use them, really kind of twisted inward and turned against me. So a lot of I'm using now to create bigger and more successful are the exact same things that took me down crazy train when I was younger. Exploration that we actually could start to play with.
Wow. I love that whole sense of, what are we making wrong about ourselves? That is actually what is strong about ourselves. And that thing of, choice creates, we talk about that all the time. And it's like, a choice is the difference between a weapon and a tool. You have one thing, and then like whatever you choose to do or be with it determines now the course that you're on. And so to be able to take something that in this reality is full of trauma and drama, full of upset, full of all kinds of things that, from my point of view, are not ease with the body. And to be able to take that and then to say, you know what, I'm choosing this, and I might not know what it's going to look like, and it may be bumpy sometimes, and that's not working for me. And I make the demand of myself to show up every day and to not give up and to not give in and to never quit. So if there's somebody watching, Lauren, who may be on what they perceive as the crazy train, or, maybe in that place where, sometimes they wake up and wonder, what's the point of being on this planet? I realize you have all that process, all that journey, all that experience, and to be able to put it into a little nugget, what would you like to invite them to, or what nugget would you like to convey to them?
I would say that they're not alone, first of all. I think that's the most important, is we think that we are by ourselves in our struggle, or that there's no support here. Just as we did that energy pull where we softened and expanded, if you could, like, even right now, soften and expand, being with your body, actually asks for the awareness of who or what is here to support you. You may start to, I always do that, and there's like lights that kind of shoot off all around me. There's a lot that's actually here supporting you, that has your back. There's also more, tangible, I would say, support system. So find yourself support. If you are suicidal, if you are really, 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 really struggling, get out, look for what will create more ease. And for me, like those early years of medication, I required that. I needed something to help me find my equilibrium so that I could ask a question. I could put in tools. I don't think I would have been able to do that in the early years without having that kind of equilibrium first. I'm not a yay or nay with that. I'm like, do what works for you, but don't stop there.
Yeah.
And if you could just tap into the supports you have, and then also know that you aren't alone, you're not wrong. What you're perceiving right now probably isn't yours. It's your energetic awareness. Now comes the fun part. You actually get to start to explore how you can use that. And that's a totally different, that's a process, a conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you look at this, it's almost like, you know, the greater the wrongness that you perceive of yourself, it's like, wow, there's that much more strongness than I ever imagined, right? So it's like, oh, you know, how big can I go with me, with my life, with what I'm choosing? Instead of, I think there tends to be this tendency to try and shrink and get as small or non-existent as possible, which is
or to manage it.
Yeah, which is exactly.
I have to manage it. I have to pull it back. I can't go big. I've got to manage it from here. But perceive that space. That's this thing that we talked about, pulling energy in, where it's super contracted and uncomfortable. You got to exhale, people.
Yes.
You got to exhale.
And exhale your entire being and allow it to be out there. And I get that there's this sense of danger for people with that. Go.
There's just something with the danger quotient. Like, I was, rightly so, I was in a talk to the entity facilitator class, and someone was talking about having the entities and the energies here to support push past your barriers of kind of that solidity of like, oh, it's not safe, whatever, like overtake me, basically.
Yeah.
And Shannon had actually stopped the class. She said, for a lot of you that may be accessible, she said, she used me as an example, lovely. Just so you know, for someone like Lauren and what she's been through a lot of psychological scary moments that may not be as juicy and accessible. And it was nice just having that nugget of acknowledgement. What I did with that is I took it and used it my way, which is part of the success factor in a big, big way. How can you take the information and use it for your advantage?
Yeah.
And I started allowing myself to peek at it. Like, we have this crazy thing where it's like, okay, well, if I'm not going to be wrong and I'm going to be strong, I got to do it all at once.
Yeah.
And super big, and we flip the fuck out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's
and
not
get it
necessary
right.
to do that. And to get it right, where you can peek. Push down your barrier and peek at it. Receive it as much as you can. You can put your walls back up later. Like, do what works for you. And if you have been through different circumstances, we all have our own background, interestingness. Do what's accessible at the moment, and then continue to push that growing edge.
Yeah.
And that's truly what I did. Yeah.
I'm going to take this moment here to do what's one of my roles on the show, which is to translate the show into non-access speak or non-energy speak for other people. Folks who are watching the show maybe for the first time, folks who aren't well-versed in energy work or in the tools of access and everything, I'm going to, an awareness just popped for me of something, a real-life example of something that we talk about being able to peek at something and not being able to go big right away. I studied the martial arts from the time I was 10 years old up until I was nearly 30. And I used to teach and everything. And like now, not having studied for years, when I think about going back in there, I'm like, oh, I can't do what I used to do. Like, I don't have that capacity right now. And as I've been stretching more over the past couple of months, I'm finding myself growing into that capacity again. And so, like, if I was to start with Kung Fu again, I might start with Wing Chun, which was originally designed for the elderly, for women, and for children. You know, something that was designed to give you what you needed now in this moment. But as you grow into this, and as you grow more flexible, and as you grow stronger, you'll find that those capacities expand, and that you're able to do more. And that if you ultimately want to do these giant flying sidekicks and take an armed warrior off a horse, that's available to you, maybe not today, but eventually. And like this whole thing of like, you know, knowing where you are, to take that peek, to look at what's possible, and to take that step now, to make that choice now of what's possible and available to you today, but with the awareness that this is just a step, and this is only the first step, and that the journey goes on.
Yeah, and acknowledging where we are today too. I mean, I get that can sometimes be a limitation where we look at what's here today or right now, and we judge it as not being where or how we'd like to be, and then we actually are keeping ourselves locked into the continuation of the past energy, as opposed to acknowledging, or not opposed to, but another possibility would be to acknowledge, okay, this is what is at this moment, this is, you know, what has been, and what could I choose right now? And like Lauren said, I can always go back to that. It'll always be there if I want to go back to that. But what else could I choose right now that, even if it just was a little more kind to me, or it felt just a little bit better in my body, like, would I be willing to choose that and to look at that? And sometimes that can be that peak of like, you know what, I don't have to get it all right in this very moment. Maybe you will, not to say that's not possible. And yet, what if we don't have to have that expectation, and we can allow ourselves to be on the journey that we are on, and just keep asking, what is it that I would like to be creating? What is it that I would like it to be? How would I like to be in my body? What is the ease that I'm asking for?
Sure, and be aware of the conclusion that you're coming to that's holding you back. Like when I get out of bed at nearly 50 years old and like my body's creaking, I'm like, oh man, I'll never be able to do that again. Right? Like I'm never gonna, right. Yeah, so I mean that conclusion that I'm coming to about what I'm not capable of right now, I've created a limitation for myself, and that's completely self-inflicted.
And for someone who's going through a lot of like mental, emotional interestingness, it's, you know, I'm working with a lot of different clients now from the book, and everyone wants to jump to like the back chapters. Well, how did you get there?
Yeah.
And like what you don't understand, and if you actually read the book, there are those moments where it's just that settling into now and being soft with it. That choice actually creates dynamically. Sometimes it's not the, I'm going to get out and do this massive thing. There's a space of being present with yourself, being an allowance of that, and just choosing what's easy at that moment. And I think we don't look at that a lot. There's this constant thing where I've got to work hard or challenge myself or be moving all the time. There's also a way too that if you go from 0 to 100, a lot of people try to heal anxiety, depression, stress, all of that interestingness by flipping to the polar opposite and by trying to be uber happy and big and blah, 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 blah. That's actually just using polarity to create a change that's actually not sustainable. It's not about going from one to the different opposite. Oh, I'm super upset, so I have to go do something that makes me extremely excitable. That's just going to a polarity that, unfortunately, because you're on two very different charged ends, I'd like to think of it like a battery. You're on your negative end here, you're very upset. So what do? You try to go to the positive polarity here, you're still supercharged. It's very difficult to maintain ease that way. What you desire to do is come more to that middle space where there's not enough charge. It's just more about being spacious and at ease. And if you just get present and choose, what's easy for me right now? What will create more ease for my body? What support is there? One step at a time while wondering about future. That's a beautiful combination that may give you more ease with going forward.
It's like saying, oh, I'm not going to stop for gas because I don't have time. And it's like, okay, well, that's an interesting point of view because it might not actually work in the long game. So,
and what's actually creative? Sometimes it's not working 10 hours a day. Going laying by the beach for 4 hours. That's highly creative. Doing something juicy for your body. That adds a different energy. If you allow yourself to, if you're looking at going big in particular, you're going to have a lot more on your plate. That's the
Yeah.
conversation of hiring other people, pulling in more support, and also not working yourself to death, but allowing what needs to be done
Yeah.
to ring at you when it's actually there to pop and be creative. And then in the meantime, allowing those energies to continue to play and kind of create themselves around you.
For the people, for the people who are in that space now where they really are, you know, they're beginning to acknowledge the space that they be and the, you know, the capacities. Oh, Lauren,
You're here. I can hear you.
Oh, okay. And the capacities, you know, that we're starting to play with. And now for someone now that is like, okay, so now I'm ready to put a lot of my energy into this creative, generative space. You know, I'm not looking to fix things as much or clear things. And I just, you know, I'm ready to get on the rocket ship. Before we get to the next thing, for you, what are you looking at in terms of going big? And then I'm wondering if we could segue into, for those people who are looking to start creating and generating more, what some of the tools are that you're using on your journey for your way of going big.
Mm-hmm. Well, currently it's just the question of getting out of my own way.
Yeah.
And not over identifying with my creations. And I think that's what a lot of people do. It's like if you write a book, that book's an extension of you. But unfortunately with that, you're so tied in. If it doesn't do well, all of a sudden it's not that the book's not successful, it's you're not successful also. Or the book can only be seen in a certain light because I only want to be seen in a certain light. So there's this interesting thing that when you are creating something and allowing it to go big and go out in the world and do what it wants to do without your momming it or trying to control it, you got to start looking at where that personalization can come off. And it's almost like giving birth to a kiddo. You know what I mean? It's like you grow it, you're feeding it more nutrients. You've got this infant now, you got to feed it a little bit more. You start letting it sprout its own legs, really recognizing the point where it's a fully fledged adult and out and about in the world. And then you're there to have its back.
Yeah.
But you're also there to really listen to it. And I think that's kind of where I am right now with my book. I've got some other projects that are kind of more infant stage, allowing them to continue to grow. And there's something interesting about allowing them to actually have the space that's required for them to get where they desire to go. It's if you're trying to create or looking to create more of a movement where there is something that's very different, you have a unique perspective, there's a different possibility that you're aware of. It has more of a movement energy that has more of an ooze to it. It may pop big quickly, who knows? But there also may be these smaller steps along the way. A lot of us will get frustrated and we'll start to give up if it doesn't go big right away, or if those small steps don't feel fun or as poppy and intense as we desire. What's happening in those quiet moments is my question.
Yeah. What I hear you actually talking about is a willingness to be and have vulnerability. With yourself, with the creation, and with everybody else that is going to be interacting with it now and in the future. Wow. So yeah, that piece of like going big, and it's not actually going big with armor. It's actually the more vulnerable we can be. Yeah, the more vulnerable we can be, actually allowing that creation to also contribute to itself growing in the world, and you being willing for it to be whatever that is going to be.
And it's interesting too, because if you look at something like I've created with the book, it's my personal story. It's highly personal. It's a very intense read, especially those early years. And writing it was very cathartic to me. It was a big processing, clearing thing that I was going through. And then by the end of the book, it was like, it's the book, it's not me anymore. And it's fascinating to actually put a personal story out there where there really isn't an identification with it anymore. People are also going to interact with it very differently than they would interact with me. And that's okay. It's not my job to try to control it. Like my publisher was talking about another author they had, and he was putting quotation marks around like every other sentence. And they're like, why did you write that way? He's like, well, I really wanted to be able to emphasize this point. Like they have to read it this way, and that's where the emphasis has to be. And the publisher's like, people don't read that way. They have to, like, to be able to allow people the kindness to interact with what you've created and to get from it what they desire and what will contribute without you having to push a point of view.
Yeah.
It's very, very, very different, but a lot of us have that. If I create something, this is how it's going to be perceived, because that means I'm successful.
Yeah.
So the you know, this being the art of creation show, I want to talk to you for a minute about the act of creation of this book, your vulnerability in creating that book, and the courage that was required for you to tell the story. Because this isn't like, you know, this isn't the story about our summer by Lake Como. You're like, you know, this isn't like, you know, this is, you know, suicidal, you know, attempts, and this is bipolar, and this is, you know, this is a deeply personal story.
Yeah.
And there's, I would imagine, you know, I'm not making the assumption, but I'm asking, was there a certain amount of courage required to tell this story in the way it needed to be told?
Yeah. And as I was writing it, like the more and more personal it got, I kind of was like, I don't know if I'm going to be releasing this sucker. But right now it's fun and it's creating change for me. So I'm going to keep on going and writing and playing. And by the end of it, it was like, no, now it's its own thing. And I could perceive such the possibility of someone reading it and having ease, seeing more possibility, going into question with what they've always thought was super wrong and also totally unchangeable.
Yeah.
And to be able to gift that to the world, that became, again, this big expansive energy that was more, I don't want to use the word important, it was just more big and juicy than any crazy ass point of view that I had about what I had to be or do and be perceived as in the world. And there may be things that you start to create where that is there, where it is so big and the possibility for others is so huge, and for the planet and for the universe, that it will be easy to get out of your own way. My question for you is, if you haven't perceived that yet, are you actually creating smaller than your infinite being could create?
Nah.
Yeah.
Wedgie.
I love it. This is brilliant. Right? So there's this whole thing where, like, you know, I started off this question with, like, you know, this deeply personal, tightly held thing, right? And you're like, I'm gonna change the universe with this. Like, watch what I can do, right? But that wasn't your goal going in. It was like, here's what I'm doing, and look what happened. Look what it's creating, and then I'll have that, right?
And to create something, and to try that word, to try and attempt to create something that will be life-changing, all of this stuff. When you go into it with that target, there's a real inauthenticity to it. There's
the point
a
of
real
view.
pushy point of view thing. Instead of, no, this for me right now, there's an energy here I'm going to allow myself to play with. And I wrote for like 1.5 years. This was not a quick project. This was something I continued just to dive in, one Word document at a time, and allowed itself to unfurl and go, oh, this thing. I'm like, oh, okay, you're this thing.
Was this always intended to be a book, or did it start off as like individual blog posts, or how did that come about?
It was, I always write, I'm more poetic by nature. Like my writing in the past has always been more prose-based, and it was always more about like earth, I would say. Like I would write about hiking and being out in the sun and more that sensate qualities. Like that's just, for me, it just adds a beautiful energy. I've been doing that since I was like 8 years old. I would sit out in the garden and write about what was going on around me. So it started as that. And then as I was talking to people, like during trades and facilitation, they're like, wow, what if you wrote a book about this? And I kept hearing it over and over and over again. It wasn't till later that I was like, oh, the book was desiring to come through me so dynamically, I wasn't listening to the subtleties. So it found mouths to be able to speak through of, no, there's something here. What could you offer? And that was more of a choice point of, okay, cool, I am going to actually write this. So yeah, and also the other question with the, if you haven't perceived that big thing that overtakes your individuality, are you actually going as big and congruent with your infinite being as you could? Also, what have you created those little tiny things that we don't really look at or acknowledge that may be building in a very unexpected, non-predictable way to form together into something later? And there's a lot of choices I've made where I was like, I don't know why I'm doing this. This doesn't really make any sense. And yet later it joins with 5 other choices that I made to be this huge thing. So it's fascinating if you actually are willing to use everything that you've been and done in the past and just follow whatever makes you happy and gives you that fulfilled, relaxed sensation. What can you create and what is being created that you're not acknowledging right now?
I'm just really seeing this piece too of where, part of this going big, it's this willingness to be vulnerable, to be open and expanded, and also to allow the creation. What I'm hearing you say is also allowing the creation to show you what it desires and also allow it to have an energy that you're willing to perceive. So it's almost like there's a co-creation here. There's you and your story, and there's also this information that was desiring to come into the world and was like, okay, look, let's play together, and you take your story and we'll add this information and we can create something even greater that can go out into the world and have a more massive impact than just one point of view. So when people hear that, I know Elizabeth Gilbert has a great
Big Magic.
Yeah, excellent. The book, and then also she has a TED Talk for people who want to kind of just get in and get out, and she talks a lot about that. And then I know you also you do work with entities and things that are not of this plane or dimension or however people look at it. Is there anything you'd like to say about that to people who are watching, for whom this may be a completely new concept altogether?
Yeah, and creation itself has its own energy, and everything that you create has a life force. So my background is in communication. I'm a medical speech therapist, so I work with communication all of my professional career. What I did when I started learning these energetic tools and started to work with entities are just defined energy. So I'm an entity. All of you are an entity. The computer is an entity. My basket behind me is an entity. It's anything that's defined. Anything that actually is a defined energy has its own life force. It has its own consciousness. When you're able to tap into the adeptness of energetic communication, you can communicate with everything around you. That's how I wrote my book. Every choice that came up, what publisher, I did my research, I got the information. Okay, cool, book, which one? This one, okay, cool. And again, that took that personalization thing off the table because it wasn't me pushing my point of view. It was me listening and energetically communicating with that. So one way just to start to play with this, there's a whole huge conversation. You can kind of find me on Facebook, Lauren Polly Coaching. I talk a lot about this. Is to just start playing with what makes you feel lighter and what makes you feel clear. And tuning into the lightness and to the heaviness when you ask the things around you, or listening to those subtle tugs will start to give you information. So if you're asking, like you're writing a blog and you open up your Word document, instead of charging ahead with your point of view, take a second to get relaxed, expand out like we practiced earlier. You can ask those creations to now come in, step to the forefront. What are you? What topic would you like to be today? And just start playing with different things. So I could talk about this thing, or this thing happened to me, or this thing over here. There's all these different things that pop. Which one actually has the most lightness and the most interest for you? Because that's that message coming through of like, oh no, there's something here. There's a little bit more juice. Just start to write about that. And sometimes it'll pop out like 3/4 of the quarter down here, and then I have to go back to the beginning. It's a non-linear process. But allowing yourself to really look at what fills you up, what is of interest to you in that moment, what has more of a lightness, and where do you feel yourself pulled to? But if you're able to interact that way, you'll start to be able to perceive and receive the information more.
Okay, so there's two things that are coming up for me right now. And part of this has to do with the larger energy of the universe and how it contributes to us and stuff. There's this one saying that says that when the student is ready, the master will appear. Mm-hmm. And this is a big thing in Kung Fu, right? When the student is ready, the master will appear. And I feel this way about writing sometimes. Like when the right writer is ready, that story will come through, that information, that inspiration will come through. But the thing that we talk about here on the Art of Creation show a lot is that creation itself is a combination of creativity, which is getting that information, and action, which is actualizing that information. And creation doesn't happen without both. And so, there's this, I don't know if I read it somewhere, or if I was talking to somebody about it, but this concept of a muse would give you inspiration, like this kind of doling out of kind of like ladling out soup and putting this soup in your bowl. And the thing is that like you might be one of those people who at first is capable of receiving that, but if you don't finish what's on your plate, you don't get any more, right? Like if you're not willing to actualize that and turn it into something else, that like when the muse comes around again with that bowl and sees that you haven't touched what's on your plate already, you don't get a second serving, right? You might get a second shot maybe once or twice, but the people who consistently produce work and produce books and produce movies and produce, works of art are the people who are actualizing those things as that inspiration comes through. And they become these conduits for these entities. And hearing you talk about this just seems to resonate exactly with, there's just different ways of talking about it, but all of this process is the same. So,
yeah. And it's beautiful because there is that combination of being vulnerable, opening, and really listening. And then that action step. And a lot of people, they'll take action but before they listen. So there's that weird pushy thing. Or they're so stuck in listening that they're like, I just really like this, it feels good, and they never go anywhere with it. And I was like that for a while, quite frankly. Like, there's just kind of this like flighty thing that I do where, again, it was more etherical. And for me, it's been more about first embodying that, getting present with my body, opening all that space around me and down below me. And then it's that action. And once you actually start, okay, I'm not just going to play with it in my head. I'm just going to write it on a Word document, and it doesn't have to go anywhere, but just that one step of bringing it from ethereal whisper to words, that was huge. And that's how I started with poetry first. It's not published, you know what I mean? But it gave creation enough information that, not only are you willing to listen and to play with this again, you're willing to take action now. And that's when things started to really unfold.
Right, and you acquire this kind of self-confidence doing this consistently. Like, I got this idea, I wrote it down, and it was good. It was well received. Maybe it wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be originally, but what came out was actually pretty good. And the more you do that, you get this relationship with your muse where like, if you keep talking, I'll keep putting it down. I'll keep creating. I'll keep chipping away at the marble, And it's like until you get to the point where like you have such faith in yourself, where like they asked Michelangelo, how did you create David? And his answer was simply, well, I removed everything that wasn't David, right? And just like every other creative artist that I know who hears that story is like, fuck you. Are you kidding me? Like, seriously, just like, not all of us are Michelangelo, right? But this was a lifetime of listening to that muse and allowing it to come into actualization and allowing that creation to come through. And so like when it was ready for it, the master appeared. So.
And no matter where you are now, like I said, my background is in a hospital. I was very, very creative as a child, and through my medical treatment and my psychological treatment, I shut a lot of those capacities down because they were wrong. And the way to fix it and be sane was to be very smart and intelligent. So what did I do? I got a master's degree. I work at a very high, fast-paced job at the hospital. I kind of went super, super linear with that. And then all of these different things that I started to play with that actually opened me again to that creative voice. It's not that if you haven't been Michelangelo listening all your life that you can't create something amazing now. Take the first steps.
Yes. Yeah.
That's all that it is. Yeah.
And that's really what I get. And just this whole notion of going big, it could be going back to school for some sort of a degree. It could be applying for a particular job that you've decided, you could never get, or it could be, having a certain type of relationship with someone that, you've decided is not possible. It could be touring the world as a global speaker. It could be prolifically writing books. It could be going to space, or getting the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, whatever it is, whatever going big is, it can look so different for so many people. And what I'm really getting from this episode today is just this invitation to really just get a sense of hey, hi, what would I like to be today? And, hey, body, oh, okay. And what is going to actually be ease with my body and me going into the world and being vulnerable, listening, receiving, choosing, and being willing to not be perfect, and being willing to be messy, and being willing to be vulnerable, and to take those leaps, even if we fall on our nose a few times, and not being attached to what that means, just dusting off our clothes and looking, okay, well, that didn't really work. So what would be more fun, or what would actually create greater here? Who can I play with? Who can assist me? Who knows this better than I do that I can contact? And what information could I be aware of that I haven't been aware of yet?
We sit here with now internationally best-selling author Lauren Polly, but hers is a story that had maybe rocky beginnings, right? This is the perfect example of what's right about this I'm not getting, right?
Yeah.
Where those years of bipolar, kind of slogging through that, and of an attempted suicide, and all of these things, right? The book that she's written now, which helps thousands of people, wouldn't have been possible.
Yeah.
Without that struggle, without that story, and so it's one of my favorite sayings that I got in my life by whenever I meet somebody is that you never meet anybody at the beginning of their story.
Yeah.
And so
true.
Yeah, and I love this because I had lunch today with somebody who I've known for maybe a year now, a lovely young woman. Had no idea up until we had lunch today that she has a PhD in biochemistry. Right? Because she doesn't work in that field. Right? I mean, so many of the people that I meet and talk to and work with on a daily basis now have these stories that have nothing to do with their lives they're living now. And so much of what they do and who they be is informed by that past and those struggles. And we're so grateful to you, Lauren, for sharing that story with us today, and for sharing that book, and for being with us today. Now, we have a lightning round that we're going to hit you with coming into the
Ooh. That sounds fun.
Yep.
I don't know what that is, but it sounds fun.
Okay.
So now we hit you with lightning, and good luck.
I'm getting ready.
Like the Emperor and the Return of the Jedi, it's
We've not had
okay.
We've not had any casualties on the show yet, so
Not yet.
So I think you'll be okay. Let's see.
We're not asking you to be a trendsetter on this, so don't make you be the first one.
Okay.
So I'm actually not home. I don't have those questions with me.
Well, so yeah, I mean, but we know them. So
we know them. So number one, what one tool would you give to people today to get them to stop making excuses and start creating the life they truly desire?
Stop it.
Right away. Stop it.
Stop it.
Stop it.
Stop the insanity. Move forward. You've got to
Stop
really
the
learn how to
insanity, move
stop
forward.
yourself by going down that rabbit hole. And a lot of times it is just acknowledgement of, oh, wow, I'm doing something that's not generative. And this goes to creation. This also goes to destructive behaviors that you have. Notice where you're going into drama. Notice where you're going into self-sabotage. Stop.
Cool.
It's a choice. Wow. How easy.
What choice?
No.
On this show, I won't have it. No.
And I know we've plugged that YouTube video, Bob Newhart, but definitely if you still haven't watched it, just stop it. You just go and watch it when this is over. So just wanted to put that in there again. Okay, so back to you, Frank.
If you're still not watching that video, stop it.
Stop it. Go watch it.
All right. So number 2-ish. Is there a book or a blog or a TED Talk that you routinely recommend to other people?
I would say Being You, Changing the World by Dr. Dane here. Amazing, amazing read, amazing practical information. And I love the way it's written because it's in bite-sized pieces.
Yeah.
So you can totally pick it up and start on page 85 and be like, oh, today this actually really reads and resonates with me.
Awesome. So,
Cool. And of course, your book.
My book.
Your book.
That's right.
Which is entitled
The Other Side of Bipolar. Yeah.
And where that can be purchased.
It can be purchased on Amazon, Target.com. It's in local bookstores. Yeah, so all over the place.
Awesome. Awesome. I love the title, by the way, and quite a winning photo of you on the cover. But I love the title, how like this conversation of bipolarness, bipolarosity, bipolar something. All right. So like it's already got this kind of like dual thing, like you're one or the other thing, and like then there's the other side of the other. This is the other. It's the other side of the thing that you thought there was two sides of. So
yeah. Well, that was one of my reviews before the book got published. One of the book reviewers said that I take the diagnosis of bipolar and turn it upside down on its ear. And the beautiful thing is if it's not one side or the other in polarity, but your other side is actually like dismantling the entire thing, and it's at its core, what could be possible?
That's cool.
Yeah.
I love it.
So
are you familiar with something called imposter syndrome?
Ooh, no, what is that?
Yeah.
Imposter syndrome is this thing where you're afraid that at any moment people are going to realize that you're a fraud and they're going to kick in the door and turn you out into the street and it'll just be the laughing stock. So a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs who are kind of trailblazers, who have no credentials or authority to be doing what they're doing, find themselves struggling with imposter syndrome all the time. So the question today for you is, have you ever encountered imposter syndrome, and how have you combated it?
I would say I've lived my life like that. Most of us are living our lives as something that we are not. And that question I asked about you creating something that is congruent with your infinite being. Those choices, those questions, those ways of looking at the world are totally different than you coming from your defined sense of self. A lot of that is not true. It's stuff that you bought from other people. It's weird rabbit holes that you've gone down. Being able to, again, do that expansion exercise first, then start wondering, who am I? What would I like to be in the world? What would my life like to be? And what contribution can I be if I wasn't looking to contribute to someone specifically, but to something so much greater, whatever that is for you. And that may take that imposter thing and go again, flip it.
On its ear. I love it. So our final question, I think we got to the final question, and this is, Lauren, how will you outcreate yourself in the next 12 months?
I have no freaking idea, but I'm so excited to see what comes.
As are we. I know you have a bunch of projects that are cooking, so I wonder when we will have you on the show again and you can share with us some of that yumminess as that becomes served up to the world.
Yeah, and just one thing that's coming up that plays right into our conversation. I'm leading a 14 days of creating with your crazy capacities. And that starts at the beginning of this, June 17th, we kick off. So it's going to be 14 days of looking at what is wrong that's actually quite right, and how to take those whispers into the creative process, into the action steps. So if you're interested in this topic, we're going to talk a lot about communicating with entities, pulling ourselves into wholeness, and becoming more that spacious big being, and looking where we can go from here.
Awesome. And where can anybody who wants to participate in that, where can they find that information? Where can they register?
You can go laurenpolly.com/crazy-capacities.
Awesome.
You can also
Awesome.
find me on Facebook. That might be easier.
And
Lauren Polly Coaching. Yeah.
And don't you have something that is launching today as well?
Yes, today we're, oh my gosh, we're doing Busting the Glass Ceilings. Where have you put a cap on your reality? So there's still time to join. We start in 2 hours. And this is going to be an amazing, what I'm looking at is the boxes and the baskets. And the glass ceilings are fascinating to me because they're not opaque.
Yeah.
They're clear and you can see through. So you can see the possibility, you can perceive it, but that choice to actually be it in a way that is relaxed and spacious and sensual, so your body is included, sometimes just feels out of reach. So this is really about going bigger, going bolder, and all the lies that those things are actually solid and stuck. Yeah. Bye-bye. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love this thing about the glass ceiling because it's, you know, you can't see it. And then it just makes me wonder, how often do we just believe there's a glass ceiling when actually if we were to just blast through, it wouldn't even hurt because there actually isn't anything there. So, so it's that really neat thing. It's like, it's there, you just can't see it. And it's like, and what if it's just, I don't see it because it's not there and I could actually just go right through.
But there's just this thing, you know?
Yeah. So that's awesome. So anybody who would like to have more of this conversation about going big and about clearing those things that keep us from next stratosphere. It sounds like you have a really amazing choice of offerings for people. And so we encourage everyone to get on that. And thank you for being this. Thank you for being this in the world, Lauren, and for offering.
Out of curiosity, will there be a replay available for people who find this very short notice?
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Or who see this in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, the class recordings, the videos, all of that will be available afterwards and still super effective. I do, again, like this interview showed a lot of energetic exercises to actually play with the energy. And there's something about relaxing into that space that creates more change. So if you're on live, that's amazing. You can ask more specific questions. If you're catching later, those exercises will still pop open different spaces for you to start playing with. So yeah, you'll find information on that at laurenpolly.com/glass-ceilings.
Excellent.
Wonderful. Lauren, thank you so much for being on the show. Rebecca Jamie Boswell, thanks for being such an amazing co-host. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being a terrific studio audience. And thank you for not coaching our guests, because there's no coaching from a studio audience.
Although they have been an amazing studio audience.
They have
Just want to put it out
You guys have been great. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in this week. I've been Frank Fradella, your host, along with Rebecca Jamie Boswell and our very special guest, Lauren Polly. And we'll see you next week. Take care.
See you later, guys.
Bye.